Hey, thanks for checking out The Solid Verbal. Now would be a great time to subscribe to the channel for college football content all off season long.
Oregon went, 9-3 regular season?
Yeah.
Won the bowl game, obviously won the bowl game over North Carolina, who we're also going to discuss here in a few moments' time. Oregon on offense, 5th per the points per drive metric, 96th in terms of defense. So a bit of a disparity, a delta, if you will. Bo Nix on offense had an enormous season. That was really where the conversation went, I think, for most people when they talked about Oregon. His completion percentage was nearly 12 points higher last season than it had been in 2021. So a huge deal. Huge deal coming up from Auburn. He accounted for 43 touchdowns, Dan, which, if you do the math, is more than his previous two seasons at Auburn combined. The line in front of him, I think, was solid. The ground game was very physical. Oregon did not kill itself with turnovers, which was a big deal. That was one of the things to watch with Bo Nix. Is he going to do the thing where he shoots his team in the foot? He didn't for the most part. The defense, which I know you're going to talk about, had a ball hawking mentality, which maybe covers up some of the sins that I'm sure you will discuss. But across the board, I think if you're an Oregon fan, just a lot to like, right? Recruiting's been great. The portal has been great. They did lose Kenny Dillingham to ASU. Will Stein is going to be the new guy on offense. I know we're not here so much to talk about offense, but do you like the Will Stein hire?
I do, yes. I think it'll be very, very good. He did a great job at UTSA. They're going to take shots downfield. I think it's going to be a little bit more RPO-ish than it was last year with Kenny Dillingham, but from people who would know are excited for him and his offensive architecture. Yeah.
So not a whole lot to report on the offensive side. It was, I think, by and large, a very successful season on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah. So what's interesting about Oregon is relative to how they've recruited and relative to how the offense, the specifics of the Oregon offense this year, which was incredibly efficient, especially on the ground. The offensive line was great. Bo Nix was protected. They didn't turn the ball over a ton. The defense was put in an incredible position to be average, be average, just get stops at the replacement rate, and they didn't. Oregon could not get off the field on defense. They couldn't get pressure on the quarterback. Linebackers were abused from really the jump. If you watched any of that Georgia game, just Ladd McConkey is still shedding everybody running the wrong direction in that Oregon linebacking core from this past year. Michael Penix shredded the secondary. If you remember, just a lot of late rotations in that Washington game. And when Oregon had that 3-touchdown lead against Oregon State, that defensive front could not fill a gap. They were awful. And this was a team that is not without talent. They've recruited extremely well under Dan Lanning, for his brief time as head coach. And obviously Mario Cristobal stacked impressive classes. But when you look at it, what went wrong with Oregon's defense is, maybe it's a 3 coordinators in 3 years thing. Andy Avalos, Tim DeRuyter, and now Tosh Lupoy. Sure. But that happens at a lot of places. A lot of coaching turnover is just the norm. But they just didn't have it up front. Linebackers it was probably the most disappointing position group in recent Oregon memory relative to expectations, with Justin Flo and Noah Sewell, 2 5-star linebackers who are expected to sort of man the linebacking core.
And are gone now, right? They're gone.
And are both gone.
Yeah.
The secondary, across from Christian Gonzalez, who is gone because he declared for the NFL, he was arguably the best or one of the 2 best corners in the Pac-12 with Clark Phillips. He was a lockdown corner. He was the brightest spot by far of this Oregon defense. And so they couldn't get it figured out. They had the brief moment against Utah in which there were rumors of Dan Lanning kind of taking over more control from Tosh Lupoy when they shut Utah down and forced a bunch of turnovers. And what they did against UCLA was impressive, though they had to steal a possession via onside kick. It was a team that, until essentially the bowl game against a depleted North Carolina team, didn't show a lot of what an average defense would show. The good news is there's good reason for optimism for 2023, right? It's year 2 of the system, so there's more familiarity. The portal has been hit relatively hard. They got an Iowa transfer at linebacker. Jordan Burch is the big name up front, a former 5-star from South Carolina. They're hitting the portal pretty hard on in the secondary. Evan Williams, who is the younger brother of an outgoing safety, comes in from Fresno State, relatively highly regarded, if that's English. And they're still going for more dudes in the portal on defense. And they return a ton up front on defense. If that's a good thing, there'll be a ton of upperclassmen there. And they bring in, take a second to breathe, 10 defensive linemen in this current recruiting class.
So they're going hard at it. My question, though, is this.
They're throwing everything. And they hired Tulane's defensive coordinator. He's now a co-defensive coordinator and the safeties coach. So they are not taking this lying down. They see the issue and they are throwing everything at it to get it rectified.
My question is this, though. All right. Yeah. So we obviously had some underperforming linebackers that you think had a fair amount to do with some of the troubles that Oregon saw. Mm-hmm. First year of a system. I think these things are all very natural assumptions, right? You look at, in retrospect, what went down, and of course the results, they make sense to a degree. But 96 is pretty low.
Yeah.
That's pretty low. It seems to me like it's more than just one position group underperforming or the first year of the system. I mean, how specifically do we fix this?
It's pressure. It's all pressure because... Okay. And you know this better than I because you watched Kayvon Thibodeau play for your NFL team. He was a one-man destroyer of worlds. He was a horror story. And so when you have that type of gravity on the edge, your secondary can be okay. Your linebackers can be all right because if he is just that much of a problem, it's the tide that raises all ships. And so they didn't have that guy this year. They, whether it was DJ Johnson, whether it was Mace Funa, they had guys they tried out in that edge role. If you watch any of that Washington game, if you watch any of the Georgia game, they were just not getting pressure on the quarterback in any of their games, really. And so they addressed it. They've got guys coming in from both the portal and the trail. We'll see if that makes a difference. They brought pressure on Drake May, and that seemed to make a difference. A lot of more blitzing from different angles. But Drake May was without his top receiver in that game too, right? There's always context to everything. So that's the thing. And that's sort of the common thread when we talk about defenses that are unable to do anything well. It's either a talent thing, it's either a pressure thing, or it's either a coordinator completely unable to fix basic things over the course of the season. For Oregon, I don't think it's a talent thing, and I don't think it's a coaching thing. I really don't. I really genuinely think the lack of pressure and maybe to a lesser extent, there was a talent issue at linebacker. But no, if they're able to generate even, again, an average or below average amount of pressure as compared to what they were able to do or not able to do last year, you'll talk about a different defense entirely this year.
Yeah, and you know what? It's the same deal on offense. I'm going to talk about some offenses.
Yeah.
We often make the joke, the David Pollock quote, it all starts up front. Mm-hmm. It all does start up front. That's the case on the offensive side of the ball. In some cases, it's coaching. In some cases, it's playmakers. But it is really fairly basic on some level. You could get into scheme and what different coaches try to accomplish, but really it's not that complicated. Well, and sometimes you can see it coming a mile away.
It's even less complicated, and this is true of all the struggling defenses we'll talk about. It's can you defeat the human in front of you? Yeah. And do you have the most humans who defeat the most humans the most often?
I think that's right.
It turns out the team who was able to do that the most this year won the national championship.
That's right. 2-time defending national champion.
Yeah.
Georgia Bulldogs. Yeah. To your point from earlier, though, about the pass rush for Oregon, just to put it in context, 127th in the nation in sack rate. This is per some of the advanced numbers we have access to. 74th in terms of pressure rate, 115th in terms of blitzes per drop back. So in some cases, didn't even try. Right?
No.
Knew they couldn't make it.
Didn't
even try.
Corners on an island. Yeah.
Didn't even try. So you're optimistic then about Oregon. You feel
I am. Yeah. The schedule works out well. They don't have any like crazy back-to-backs, even though they have some good quarterbacks on the schedule. Caleb Williams comes to Autzen. They have a little bit of time and a bye week before they travel to Seattle to play Michael Penix and Washington. And it's there's some key pieces up front gone for Washington. So I think there's reason for at least suitable optimism.
Yeah, and to further your point, tackle success rate, which is something else that we like to look at. Are Are you defeating the human in front of you in open space?
Yeah.
They were above average, Oregon was.
And they improved
in
over the
department.
course of the year.
And they got better.
Yeah.
And they got better. So I think
until
reason
the
for
Oregon State game. Yeah.